Looking back at the age of 78, I've had a fortunate, bountiful, and productive life. I couldn't ask for more. Oh, there are some things I'd change if I went back, but of course you don't get those chances in life. For me, I look back with great satisfaction on the life I've led.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
Well, I was born March 14, 1938. And some years later, just as I was approaching my 50th birthday, I saw that Time magazine had Superman and it said he's 50. And I looked at it and I realized from the dates that he was created and introduced to the public on the day I was born. And so I bought the magazine and framed it. Here I am at the age of 78, and Superman is the same age, exactly.
Well, Groucho, would you like to meet Sheila's partner? He's waiting backstage. His name is Walter Karabian. So, Wally, would you come in, please, and meet Groucho Marx?
You're Walter Karabian, huh?
Karabian.
Are you interested in politics as a career, or are you going to go straight?
In March of 1978, there was a quasi-governmental trip to Cuba planned by the Carter administration. Now remember, in 1978, we were in the depths of the boycott of Cuba. All this was well worth it because the last night of the trip, we had dinner with the big fella himself. He was a tall man and was wearing a military uniform, smoking a cigar, and he was down smoking the butt of the cigar. Here was this man who had the greatest cigar manufacturing enterprise in the world, was smoking that cigar all the way down to the butt like this, and he squinted as he lit it again to get the last few puffs out of the cigar. I had taken along 2 baseballs for my stepsons, Sean and Ryan Doheny. I asked Castro to sign them. He lit up like a Christmas tree because he was a baseball freak. He was a great Cincinnati Reds fan because he had lived in Ohio for part of his life. Con aficionado Marzo 1978, Fidel Castro. I brought it home to the boys, made them swear that they would keep them in a safe place, but one of the boys played catch with his and lost it in the backyard someplace. Well, when I came to USC, I thought in terms of what else was I going to do other than be a student. So I got eased into student politics, entry-level offices, Greater University chairman, blood drive chairman. Then I went into the Squires, and then the Knights, and I got elected junior class president. And then came the big daddy of them all, running for student body president. And the Daily Trojan said, Karabian wins presidency in landslide. Getting elected student body president was an achievement in college that was unsurpassed. Oh, I guess if you had been the Heisman Trophy winner at SC, you might have rivaled the student body president. And by the way, the student body presidency at USC opened many doors for me, many doors. The Democratic National Convention was slated for July 1960. A car dealer out in the valley asked a professor at USC to recommend a student to work on the welcoming committee for the Democratic National Convention. I had registered as a Republican, but I went to see this professor, and he said, I'm going to put together a host committee. Students who drive cars at General Motors donates to the convention to drive around the VIPs of the convention. So I went out and recruited 300 students. So when Eleanor Roosevelt arrived in Los Angeles, there was a new white General Motors car with a big emblem on it and a special California-issued license plate that said Democratic National Convention and the image of a donkey on it. We all realized that it was going to be Johnson or Kennedy, and nobody foresaw the fact that Kennedy would take Johnson on the ticket. So, in my position, I had exposure to these two prominent candidates. So I had several occasions to chat with Lyndon Johnson and a couple of major ones to chat with John F. Kennedy. And so it was rewarding for me when they established the Democratic ticket as John Kennedy for president and Lyndon Johnson for vice president. It was a high point in my career, and shortly after the Democratic convention, I changed my registration from Republican to Democrat.
Are you interested in politics as a career, or are you going to go straight?
Well, I'm interested in politics, Groucho, and I think that when you mention that about going straight, I think that this is a misconception so many Americans have today, that they think we're electing a lot of crooks and playboys that go back there to Congress or go up to the state legislature. And the main thing is that these men could be making probably 3 and 4 times the salary that they're making in public life, in industry or business, and yet they're donating their time and their service for the community or for the state or for the nation. And I think that's a very noble ambition.
Well, I was ambitious. I had strong feelings about public issues, and I felt I could do something about them in a position of power. I was 28 years old when I got elected. I was among 4 legislators elected under the age of 30 in the history of California. The impact was that at first they didn't take me seriously because most of them were the age of my father or my grandfather. So they tended to see you as a passing freak.
McClatchy Broadcasting presents State Capital, a weekly discussion of state issues with the decision makers of California's state government and state politics. Our guest today is Assemblyman Walter Karabian of Monterey Park, chairman of the Assembly Select Committee on Prison Reform and Rehabilitation.
Sacramento was a collegial environment when I got there. You were evaluated not on your party label, but on the substance of your character and your mind.
Mr. Karabian, let me quote from a speech of yours. With the exception of the Vietnam War, nothing has contributed more to the crisis of credibility with government than the sanctions we have imposed against such offenses as prostitution, abortion, homosexuality, drunkenness, vagrancy, gambling, and drug abuse. The time has come, you said, to begin a careful redefinition of the criminal law to explode offenses against private morality and taste. Can you elaborate on that?
Issues that mattered the most were an amalgam of issues to right wrongs, but also issues that I could see that we could achieve. was on the Assembly Judiciary Committee. Two versions of the bill liberalizing divorce in California had passed, one in the Assembly and one in the Senate. And under the rules of the legislature, it must pass in its precise form, not a comma difference between the two forms. So a conference committee was selected, 3 assemblymen and 3 senators, and I had no interest in the topic of divorce. I was a single guy. I hadn't contemplated marriage at that time. I was trying to catch the late flight home to Los Angeles, and they were throwing around different terms, what to call it. And most people wanted to call it no-fault divorce, which it was. But Grunsky, Senator Grunsky, did not like that phrase. So as they went on and on, out of frustration and wanting to get out of the room, I threw out, "What about irreconcilable differences?" And Senator Grunsky said, "I like that." And that's all it took. The staff put it into the bill. The bill passed both houses, went to Governor Reagan. He signed it into law, and it became the Family Law Act of 1970. Some lawyer told me some years later that there had been 146 appellate cases attempting to figure out what the legislative intent was behind those words. Well, of course, there was no intent. I just wanted to get out of the room and catch the flight to Los Angeles. In the mid-1970s, I took a trip around the world with some others, and during the course of that trip, we flew from Cairo to Bangkok. As we took off, going up out of Bombay, the Japanese Red Army terrorists took over the airplane. They got on the plane by looking like Japanese airline pilots and co-pilots or personnel that belonged on the plane. And they had those square suitcases in which they had the hand grenades and weapons and plastic explosives, which they used later to put around the doors of the airplane so that nobody could get in or get out. Under those circumstances, you have a hard time not emptying your bowels. It was terrifying. Eventually, we landed in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where we were held for 5 nights. It just sapped the energy out of you. You said your last prayer. You thought it was all over. This had been life, and it was ending here for me. So as they were yelling and screaming over the intercom, the American ambassador stepped in and demanded my release. They had a big party for me when I came home, and it spawned the great joke that was told by Willie Brown, then Speaker of the Assembly. He said, "You guys were worried about Karabian. I wasn't." He says, when that plane got to Algiers, they found those hijackers, but those cats were clean. No money, no hand grenades, no guns, nothing, except one of them had Karabian's business card in his pocket.
I am formally announcing my candidacy for the Democratic Party's nomination for Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is one of our most important public officials. He is charged with a function vital to our democratic system of government, that of overseeing our entire electoral process. The Secretary of State also commands a major platform from which to articulate the public interest. To do that, the Secretary must have an authoritative knowledge of the leading issues, especially issues which have legislative potential. Because of my experience as a successful lawyer and as an 8-year veteran of the California legislature, I believe I can perform the job of Secretary of State better than any other candidate.
If I were to describe myself in one word, I think it would be candid. I've always tried to be candid with everyone. The second word to describe myself would be complex. I know some people can't figure it out. Some of my Armenian friends say Darper Martne, he's a different guy. I don't mind being complex. I don't mind having diversity of interests and of how I view our community, certainly now in later life.
Everybody has to die, but I always believed an exception would be made in my case. Now what? With that humorous postscript, the long, bountiful, and prolific earthly life of William Saroyan came to an end.
It was always there for me. My Armenian identity was always there. It wasn't as prominent as it is today, but it was always there inside me. When we had the first genocide commemorative resolution, which I authored in the Assembly and George Zookmajian authored in the Senate, it was the first time the members of the legislature had even heard about the genocide. This was 1967. I felt it was my duty to educate them, and I did.
When Walter Karabian served in this House as its majority leader, he caused many of us who were totally and completely unfamiliar with the history of the Armenian people, and the heightened awareness of the Armenian people's plight has become a part of the work and knowledge of many members of the California State Assembly and Senate, as well as the other elected officials.
As an Armenian, I opened doors. Remember, I was the third Armenian-American elected in the history of the United States. That gave a powerful boost to other ones who wanted to run as they did after me in the 1980s and 90s. By keeping fairly active and participating, I was a role model for many, and I accepted that role, if you will, to motivate younger Armenians, men and women, to engage in politics to better not only themselves, but to better their community and their constituency. And to that extent, I think I've left a strong, powerful legacy. I'm not through yet, but I certainly have left guidelines and example both of candor and of complexity to generations that have followed me, now that I'm a senior politician emeritus, if you will.